in Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right, ready to go here. We got so excited. Let me turn my earphones down.
Well, it's always social hour when we change studios.
Yeah.
We have to catch up with Kathleen.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Who's a marvelous host. And we always sit in there listening to most of her program if they're putting it into the ready room where we sit before we get started here. And it's always great listening to her. And she had two wonderful guests who came in, and they too were talking about the problems that we face in this country. And the subject came up: how we gonna save our country? And the gist of our conversation was, and I think we all need to remember this, and that is that we cannot hope to take back our country unless and until we first take back our children. And what that means is we have to take our children out from under the control of the people who propagandize them, brainwash them, fail to educate them, fail to do all the things that they're supposed to do in exchange for all of that money, and turn them against us in so many ways, fail to particularly for the sons and the children, sons and daughters of immigrants who are recent. They failed to teach them anything about America, and what little they do teach them is usually negative about America. So we're going to be talking a lot more about school choice. There's going to be a lot of new events coming up here in the next couple of months. I think you're interested. But in the meanwhile, today is, or at least tomorrow rather, is Labor Day. So if you're with us tonight, we really appreciate it. This is the last big holiday before school starts and the rest of the world starts. But most importantly, it is when the political season begins. Everybody knows traditionally that even though we have it seems the perpetual campaigns and perpetual political promotion of campaigns, Americans are still pretty much the way they've always been. They start paying attention to politics on or after Labor Day, right into the first week of November. That's when it gets hot. That's when people start sorting it all out. Even if they've been listening for quite a while, they start to make judgments, and they start to pay attention to unique events that happen between now and then. And here in California, we have a couple things going on. While we're distracted by the congressional races and the senatorial races, mostly outside of our wonderful state, the people that run this state, and particularly the cities and the counties, are trying to get a lot of things snuck through. So we're going to talk about particularly about the ballot propositions that each of you are going to see. Or should it be that each of you is going to see? All right.
Yes.
Get the grammar.
Each is.
Get the grammar going right here. And then we want to go over some of the specialty items that are on the ballot, and to help us understand some of the bond issues that are on the ballot, we're going to have on again a fellow that we had on here a few months ago when we started. His name is Richard Michael. And Richard has a wonderful website called bigbadbonds.org. And he does a lot of great work. Some people disagree with some of his conclusions, but nobody is working harder on this issue than Richard. Nobody is working harder to bring this this information to the public and to educate the voter about just what it is that you're voting for when you put your signature on yes on a bond. When we say here in the state that we don't have deficit financing, that cities and states have to balance their budgets, that's nonsense. They are all the time borrowing money on bonds, and that is money, debt, that has to be paid much later on. We're hardly even when we pass a bond. All that money is yet to be funded, and there are going to be many tax increases down the road to help cover all of these expenses. And then, in addition, of course, they are within these districts using this money sometimes improperly to cover general administrative expenses, that is, using the money for purposes that the bond was not intended to be used for, and in fact, which has provisions in it, covenanting, that is, a contractual promise not to use that money improperly. It's a very bad situation. Richard's going to talk about a lot of that stuff, and he'll come on here after the bottom of the hour. But in the meantime, we're back on. We got a couple of other issues that are going on, and I was thinking about you, Jonathan, today, because you're a good old boy from the Low Country, right?
Correct.
All right, and that would, for the Low Country, would be, in your case, what state?
South Carolina.
All right, that's
There's
lot.
only one Low Country, I think.
Right. Okay. Now it's a lot of syllables for you South Carolina boys. All right.
Yeah.
But, now you're originally from where? Beaufort.
Well, I grew up on Hilton Head.
You did. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But you're close to Beaufort.
But my we're all from Kentucky, so
Yeah.
I was born in Kentucky.
Well, at any rate, I was thinking about you earlier here today when I picked up an article on the newspaper, on the Drudge Report, about Eric Garcetti. Apparently, this moron is still floating around the country and is thinking about running for president, apparently.
Doesn't he have a job?
Well, I
Isn't
guess
he
so.
still the mayor of Los Angeles? What's he doing running around South Carolina and Iowa and New Hampshire?
Well, that's what I want to know. But and this is a good old boy from South Carolina, because the head the lead sentence in this article is Trav Robertson. Okay, so Trav,
yeah.
He definitely from South Carolina, which is great country down there. I know we all have a little fun. And you've got Joe Wilson is from there, right?
Yes, he was our rep.
Yeah,
he represented the Beaufort area, Beaufort County.
He's the one who shouted out early on when Obama was up there in front of everybody, including the Supreme Court, in a joint session. He was the guy who shouted out, "You lie!"
Yeah,
we love Joe Wilson. What's he doing? Is he still?
He's a hero. I think he's still in office.
All right, good. Well, at any rate, the article here says Trav Robertson, chairman of South Carolina Democratic Party, likes to tell people about Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's generosity. Earlier this year, Garcetti's Political Action Committee donated $100,000 to help the mayor's ideological brethren pay for a field campaign to register African-American voters in that state. Garcetti was the first elected mayor to do something like this, said Robertson, who informs candidates running for office about the donation. He calls this the Democratic Midterm Victory Fund, Garcetti's most ambitious fundraising effort yet to help his party, is boosting the mayor's national profile and allowing him to forge alliances with party leaders as he considers a long-shot bid for the White House. Well, I could read this article forever, but that's truly astonishing. Can anybody tell me what this guy has done in Los Angeles that would recommend him for national office?
I don't know. I'm at a loss.
Yeah, I don't know. So if any of you out there know, we've got a pretty good audience, pretty bright, pretty well read, pretty well informed. If you know what he's done, let me know. But this reminds me of a paraphrase of something that they used to say occasionally about our former president, and that is that you can say that somewhere in Los Angeles, a village is missing its idiot. This guy is out wandering around the countryside thinking that he's going to be president. Now, that is just outrageous. We've got about 1 minute to go here, and when we come back, I think we might have a caller, and then I want to have a few comments about Labor Day. How much time we have left, Jeff? We got 50 seconds. Well, anyway, I'll start talking about Labor Day because I think that we sometimes get a kind of a false or political concept of labor, and it's really skewed. When we think about Labor Day, we typically tend to think of it in publicity terms, political terms. Well, there's the music. I'll finish after this. We hope that you'll call in and join us. Our telephone number is 870-5752. We love to hear from you. Jonathan Wilson, Mike Alexander. We'll be back with you after the break. All right, back with you here. Well, before I get back to my Labor Day monologue, which I should have started off with, I shouldn't have swerved into the oncoming traffic here with Eric Garcetti. But I do have a call here from George from Los Angeles. How are you tonight, George? Thanks for calling in. Are you there? Hey, Brooke, we have the lovely Miss Brooke is here. I see George is up on the line. Well, if you get him back, let us know.
Yeah, he's on line 1, I believe.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Do you have him there, Jeff? Okay, sounds like he went off. All right, no problem. If we get him back, we'll bring him on. In any event, Labor Day is often seen as labor versus management. It's conceived in political terms, and it harkens back to the days when management, where you were supposed to be Republican, and labor, you were supposed to be a Democrat. And this Labor Day was always kind of seen by a lot of people as a day that belonged to folks that were in manufacturing, who were engaged in physical labor, farming, perhaps, heavy-duty service work, and working in restaurants, that type of thing. But I think that that's a very narrow view of labor, and it has helped to create a supposed a false opposition and hostility, if you will, between labor and management. And that's really terrible because that's each and every one of us labors, each and every one of us takes our time, and we engage in something that is not only intended to remunerate us, but work is what we do as men and women, as God's creatures. And it strikes me that we have a very, very narrow and unnecessarily and unjustifiably materialistic concept of labor that robs it of its true significance, because labor is noble. When we work, we express ourselves. We work for others. We help raise our families. We support the work of the home. We support the work of our fellow colleagues in business or in industry, in the professions, in the military, on a fire truck, in a squad car, and in 100,000 other places that we human beings carry out our ambitions and meet our obligations to our family, to feed them and to nurture them and so forth. This is not political per se. This is do we have this guy back on now? Okay. All right, you want to take George on line 1? He's got something to say about Eric Garcetti here. This could be a good guy. Let me know when you're ready over there, Jeff and Brooke. Are you having some problemas? Okay, no problem. Let's go back to that. When you go to the Bible, man for the first time is told when he falls, when he and Eve make wrong decisions, then from then on, God tells them they're going to have to earn their bread by the sweat of their brow. And so from then on, work, or having to work, was mistakenly and narrowly viewed as a punishment of God. But in fact, it's not. If you look a little earlier, and his wife and his progeny were given dominion over the world. So we were entitled to exercise our human freedom, our human creativity, our ambitions, our own vision for creation of the world in an image not inconsistent with that of God. And then later on, because of man's sinfulness, that work, instead of becoming rewarding and fulfilling, was physically exhausting, because nothing was the same after the original sin and so forth. But it's contributed the emphasis in the Bible, and the difficulty of labor that we sometimes encounter has robbed it of its significance, and as a result, we don't honor everybody's labor. And now we have a situation here in the modern United States where the time and the effort that you spend or did spend in the past earning money is put aside, and then over half of it is expropriated by the state and federal government and the cities and 1,000 other maggots, government people who are just sucking your money. What are those little black things that you get on you?
A tick?
No, not a tick. They're blood suckers. What's the name of them? A leech. Oh, yes. Right. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. Okay. And now for $90 a daily double, Jeff, are you ready? All right. This guy's the answer man tonight. Yeah. We our money gets leached away, and if we happen to put it in savings, all of a sudden everybody forgets that you already earned that money. You already paid taxes on it. They want to pay you taxes on the earned income. And then if you accumulate too much of it, they say, oh, no, you have too much, and they'll tax away half or more of it at the time that you die if you happen to have accumulated too much. Everything that we have in savings, it represents somebody's labor. Somebody somewhere along the line labored, put in work in order to generate that money. But those who have designs upon our labor and our money want to recharacterize it as capital. Now, I'll come back to that. Do we now have George from Los Angeles? Are you there, George?
Yes, I am.
All right. We had a little trouble getting you on here tonight. You had a comment here, I think, about our, well, not mine, but perhaps your beloved Mayor, Eric Garcetti.
Oh, yes, and this is quite a difficulty. I was saying that he might do better as a vice president because he's kind of a stumpy little fellow, and he'd do better like Charlie McCarthy sitting on someone else's lap,
Yeah.
And the thing where I first ran into his problems was he's got his billionaire building and land developers who big friends, and they tried the Manhattanization of Hollywood, 28-story buildings, etc. Well, they didn't really think about the earthquake faults and all this. Plus, the people, all of us, have stood up and said, "Stop it, you fool." And so these people had to go out. And as we kind of know, about 3/4 of many of these, construction crews, all this.
Well, George, let me ask you this.
Illegal aliens.
Well, yeah, they're all big on that. He's a card-carrying Democrat. He believes every stupid thing that there is to believe. That's what they do. Where does this guy get his money? I mean, who's really supporting him?
It is basically the big-time, these developers. There's 3 of them reputed to be good buddies. They're billionaires. He has the Hollywood crowd, and he has a bunch of bicycle lobbyists who are very rich. And this is where the taxation comes in, because, you see, he has this cyclovia where he closes off an area of the city, and only bicycles can ride.
Okay, so now we have a new slur for us conservatives that we can use. We can call them, instead of limousine liberals, we'll call them what? Bicycle liberals?
Yeah, bicycle
something-
liberals
yeah.
and drip dry suits.
Drip dry suits.
Yeah, but nobody's seen them in these bike lanes that keep popping up in the road diet of his interpretation of the state mandated movement 2035.
Right.
But the problem is the road diet
Okay, well,
increases traffic.
George, we know he's a disaster, so
But hey,
quick,
the bicycles don't pay any registration or any gas tax.
Oh,
And
no, they're-
meanwhile, the cars burn up the gas.
yeah, but what they do, the chief virtue of a bicycle is that it can be used as an excuse to eliminate traffic and to create a new lane and to issue contracts to special interests. Now, quick question for you before I move on to the next caller. A quick yes or no: should Eric Garcetti get out of town and run for office, or do you want him here?
I do believe he should stay here, and he should talk to his father about what goes on, because his father was a district attorney.
Yeah, that's Gil
and
Garcetti, yeah.
He delved into municipal corruption of the 82 city agencies in the Los Angeles County, that make up SCAG, the Southern California Association of Government. So he ought to be thinking about going into that and breaking the fraud and the upward spiral of their costs, their the way they pay people, and everything that is
Totally with
started
you.
by unions. And then once the union workers go up there, then the city or whatever, agency workers say,
George.
our pay should be like there.
George, thanks for your call.
By the way,
Yep.
George, we want to thank you. We got your contribution in the mail this week.
Well, I'll hopefully be able to do more, hopefully soon, but regularly.
Yeah, well,
That's
that
the
means
key.
a lot to us. We really appreciate it.
George, thank you for all of us. And now we have Bill on line 2, and he's got an opinion on what Eric Garcetti ought to do. What do you say, Bill?
Well, what David Brinkley titled one of his book, Everybody's Entitled, in my opinion. So there you go. No, let's not forget Gil Garcetti. What famous trial was he DA over? We all know.
Oh, yeah, the O.J.
It was
trial.
an ex-football player turned actor who was
Right.
very successful, right? Who went to jail in Nevada, but not for the crimes out here. But Gil
Right.
Garcetti was a DA at the time. O.J., of course, there you go, yeah.
Yeah.
See, the apple does not fall far from the tree, gentlemen. There you
Yeah.
go.
So
Now-
Eric Garcetti, go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. No, go ahead. Go
Yeah,
on.
well, so Eric Garcetti, we know, that he got plaudits from George Will. So you got George Will running around this country condemning Donald Trump and saying that I don't know what he said a number of far-fetched things which amount to let the Democrats run the country until we find a Republican that George Will can believe in. But I think hang on.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately that George Will be most famous for having spoken approvingly about this Garcetti character. And
Well, if they-
go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No, I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead. Go on. I want to hear.
No, go ahead. We got 1 minute. It belongs to you, Bill.
Well, as they say, where there's a will, there's a way. I will give George Will credit for having hung in there as a Cubs fan all those years when they finally won the World Series. But let me say this: this is something I want to tell you. I can hold over after the break because this is a true story about Garcetti that was shown in the news 2 years ago on CBS with Dave Bryan, and it did not make him look good.
Well, here's what I want you to do. What I want you to do, Bill, would you call in after 9 o'clock? Because at 8:30 hour, when we start that, I've got Richard Michael coming on to talk about bonds. So call in just after 9. We'll take you then. Love to hear that story. This is Mike Alexander, And what's your name again, Guy?
I can't remember.
No recuerdo.
No, it's Jonathan Wilson.
Yeah, Radio Free Los Angeles, radiofreelosangeles.net. Back with you after the break. Okay, Mike Alexander back with you here with Jonathan Wilson. And we want to remind you again, just as Basil Hoffman, who recorded the lead-in announcement, said, this is citizen-sponsored radio. We're doing very important work. I've had a number of contributions come in recently, a number of people getting on our email list. This program is growing because of you, and I want to remind you, and we're going to recognize those people later, but I want to remind you that this is citizen-sponsored radio. Nobody else is doing it. We have to do it free market style. We don't own the mainstream media. We don't own the schools or the universities or the nonprofits. So we have to get on radio here. We have to reach out to you, and we have to work together. And we appreciate your support. We could use some more of it. And Jonathan, if they want to help keep this show on the air and expand our work during this important election season, where do they go? What do they do?
It's super easy. Just go to our website, and our website is CaliforniaTaxpayersUnion.org, and just click the join button and choose the plan that works for you. A monthly contribution of any amount will make you a member of the California Taxpayers Union. Any amount, even $1.
Right. So. That's California Taxpayers Union or tax limitation?
CaliforniaTaxpayersUnion.org.
Got it. So that's where to go. There's directions from there. Now, as I mentioned it when we started the show tonight, we're going to have a segment on bonds, and we're very fortunate to have with us again Richard Michael, whose website is bigbadbonds.org. How are you tonight, Richard?
Hi, good, Mike. It's .com, but
.com. Okay, why don't you correct that right away with the right website? Go ahead, Richard.
Just bigbadbonds.com.
Got it. Okay, and that website is an incredible resource for anybody who wants to know what's going on with bonds. Now, Richard, we know that we have a number of bonds coming up on the California ballot here, the statewide ballot. Is there any one of those bonds that you think should be approved by the taxpayers?
Well, all of them are fraudulent, so there
okay.
isn't, and that's my criteria, so there are none that should be approved.
Richard, you and I have had the opportunity to speak many times, but wholly aside from whether a bond has a legitimate purpose, wholly aside from whether it's a good idea, bonds are required before they can be issued. They're required to be approved by the voters, and they have to comply with the law in a number of other important ways. Is that correct?
Yes, they do.
And many of these bonds...
Every tax does.
Yeah, every tax does. And many of these bonds that are out there, you have reviewed, and you have concluded that the legal criteria, the conditions that are imposed by state law, by local law, or by the SEC, that in many cases they have not been met. Is that correct?
I would say invariable in all cases.
All right. So maybe you could walk us through the way in which the typical defects that you're finding with bonds that are floated, whether they're by the state or a school district or a city. What should voters be aware of?
Basically my expertise is going to be the city, because I don't really deal with the state bonds. They're under different law, and they actually create the law in the bond issuance. So these are local bonds that will be either Proposition 46 bonds, which was passed in 1986, or Proposition 39 bonds, which is restricted to school and college districts, which was passed in 2001. So those are the two exceptions to Proposition 13 that allowed these bonds to become local taxes against, basically ad valorem taxes against your property, the property that you own, whether it's business property or residential property or commercial property.
Okay.
So in in the proposition in the bonds that are going for school districts and college districts, they have their advantage. Their main advantage is the 55% passage criteria. So they have conditions imposed by them by the authorization provision in the Constitution that requires that there are 4 things that they must do.
And what are those 4 things?
Well, 2 of them are simple, and they're future things. In other words, they're just promises to do something. They are to conduct an annual financial audit and an annual performance audit, financial being just the bookkeeping type audit, and performance being whether the money was spent on the things that they said it was going to be spent on. So those 2 audits are future. You don't know whether they're going to be complied with until after the bond is, in operation.
Correct. But the other 2 conditions must precede the place of the bond on the ballot. Is that correct?
Right. Well, one of them absolutely precedes it, and that is a list of the specific school facilities projects to be funded. That one is always derogated. It's always made less than they're making it the types of things that will be done. They make it will be done on everything in the district. They make it will be done even it will be the money will be used on future sites that we may come up with later,
right.
10 years down the road. So there's nothing specific that the voters know before they vote, and that's part of the requirement of the constitutional provision that allowed this. There's nothing in the measure itself that lets the voters know that this is what the money will be spent on.
Right.
Because the language always undermines, the language of the measure written by the lawyers always undermines that. In other words, there's no guarantee that any of these will be done. There's no guarantee there'll be enough funds for all of the stuff that we're selling you. There's no guarantee of anything. And we can change our mind later. So you see that language throughout the measure in multiple places. So that's one of the things. But that's kind of, if you argue with people on that, it's kind of, it's not as clear and crisp, because there's, how do you, what is specific enough and what is not specific and things like that.
Well, let's spend a little time on this because I've seen this problem come up. For example, down in San Marino, you and I have both had a lot of conversations with San Marino people. And by the way, all of you out there, whatever problem it is that Richard and I are talking about with a particular city, trust me, you have the same problem in your neighborhood. You have the same problem in your county. There's nothing unique about this, about San Marino or any other city. This is happening all around us. Down in the city of San Marino, we came to learn that a lot of the monies that were being expended, and I think they have the same problem in the Pasadena school district, but that the school districts were in fact spending money, proceeds from these bonds on general administrative expenses, spending them on things other than whatever it was, other than what the bond was supposed to cover. But your point here is that bond description is very often inadequate. That is, it's not sufficiently detailed to let us know how the money is going to be used, and that may be viewed as intentional because later on, when they use that money for other purposes, that lets them weasel and argue that this was within the scope of the bond. And all of this is done, I take it in your view, with a wink and a nod between the people who draft the bonds and the people who draft the ballot language. Would you agree with that? Is that where you're headed with this?
At one point, that may have been the case, but I think at this point, because the people that authorize the bonds, which are the local governing boards of the college or school or city councils or whatever, if they do a bond, the people that approve them, basically, in most cases, are part-time, employees. They're part-time public officials, and they have no clue about what's behind the bonds. So they rely on the superintendent and the the staff of the district or the staff of the agency,
right?
And the staff relies, because the staff has no clue about these things either. The staff relies on the lawyers and the advisors that they hire, and the lawyers and the advisors that they hire have one goal: to make money.
Right.
So their goal is to get the bond passed at any cost, because that's how we make our money, and we're going to do everything in our power to do this. So whether it's actually explicitly talked about anymore, at one point it likely was, but in the current context, maybe for the past 10, 15 years, I don't think the conversation is even had.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like, we just are going to follow whatever you tell us to do. And they've gotten into a routine, the advisors and lawyers have gotten into the routine of, well, we can basically, they are running the show.
Right.
Whatever they say goes, whatever they say doesn't need to be there, or they can do it this way, that goes too. So
yes.
Now,
Richard,
knowledge on the
Richard, I want you to hang on to your point. We're very fortunate to have with us tonight Richard Michael of BigBadBonds.com. Be sure to check out his website during the break, give you a little bit better idea what he does over there. We'll be back here just a minute or so. Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, call us in, Radio Free Los Angeles. All right, back with you. Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, RadioFreeLosAngeles.net. Go there, sign up for us so you can get our notices. And we're back here with Richard Michael of BigBadBonds.com. And, I guess it's we need to do our own recording, and the refrain will be Big Bad Bonds. I can't go as low as Tennessee Ernie Ford here. We'll have to raise it.
Big Bad Bonds.
I think that was Jimmy Dean.
No,
that was exactly the thing that was in my head when I came up with that domain name.
Yeah, a lot of people have done it, but Tennessee Ernie Ford was the first guy to do Big Bad John. But many people have done that because of such an appealing song. And Tennessee Ernie Ford was a great gospel singer, great country and western singer, had his own TV show, and that, I think, was probably his single biggest hit back in the 50s. We all heard it, all listened to it. Now, how's that for dating oneself here? I could almost see our young call screeners in there rolling their eyeballs about this old geezer talking about things in the 1950s. But at any rate, we have a little fun. Richard, to summarize your last point, there's no longer any collusion. The city councils are just rubber stamping these bonds and other revenue proposals. They're created by the issuers, the brokerage companies, the agencies that generate it, the lawyers that write these bond propositions, the bonds themselves that have to meet certain criteria in order to be tax exempt and so forth. You're saying that the cities and the members of the school board, they're just taking the data feed from the lawyers and the bureaucrats and signing off on all this stuff, and they don't really have a very clear idea what they put in front of the voting public. Would that be your feeling?
Yeah, and that is there are on some governing boards there are some exceptions. For example, Twin Rivers in Sacramento County was going to propose bonds, but one of the two of the trustees there said basically to the rest of the trustees on the board that until there's a specific list of things, I'm not going to vote for this. And so there are some people that actually understand it, but most people it's sort of like finance, money, dollar signs, and they just glaze their eyes over it. They have no idea how it works.
Right.
They just think, well, the lawyer said it was okay, so we can do it.
Sure, and that's
but I'd like to switch a little bit here.
Please do. Go ahead.
Mind.
Go ahead.
Because, and this is in relation to next week, and you may have already announced this previously, but Howard Jarvis is holding their 40th anniversary of Proposition 39 or Proposition 13 conference in Ontario in San Bernardino County next Saturday.
Yes.
And I expect that it's an all-day conference, and there's going to be lots of talk about probably the sponsorship of the repeal of the gas tax measure or Proposition 6. But there's going to be a lot of people there. Maybe some of your listeners are going to be going there.
Yes, I will be there.
This is one of the areas where I think that we need people to start challenging these elections based on the fraudulent use of the fraudulent elections in the terms of we are not getting a fair and impartial election because the registrars, in conjunction, in participation with the lawyers and the districts and the county treasurers and all the people that are going to make money on the bonds, not just the money that the bonds generate, but the financial stuff that the counties make, because that's revenue to the county.
Oh yes,
that they get. So they're all making money on it, and this is a gravy train that they don't want to end, and it's actually increasing. So what we did, or what members of the Big Bad Bonds did this past year, is twice, once in March for the primary election, and once at the end of July and beginning of August for the general election, we sent notices and demands to each county registrar that had a bond, or a school bond at least, on the ballot for that election. So they all got them. And one of the things we demanded basically was follow the law. And if all these things followed the law, I would not be doing what I'm doing. But they don't, and so this is where we're looking at other options. One of the options is to set aside individual elections. For that, you need a plaintiff that lives in the district, that either lives or owns property or votes in the district. Another option that we're looking at is because this is a conspiracy to deny the voters all across the state of their right to a fair and impartial election and their right to honest services. And those are federal rights, or rights protected by the federal penal code or the federal codes, that we don't really have a similar remedy here in California.
Right.
So we're looking at broadening the outreach, not to fight individual bonds, because this is a losing battle, and it's a never-ending battle.
Right.
Because they can one district, actually, I'm just going to mention Santa Barbara, Lompoc Unified in Santa Barbara. They had a bond on in 2016 in November. They were beaten. They put the same bond on in June 2018. It was beaten again, and they put it on again for November. So they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money holding the elections. Right. They didn't get to what they want, so they just keep doing it. And it doesn't really cost them anything. It costs the taxpayers.
Right.
Because the taxpayers are funding all these elections, one way or another.
And they hope to exhaust citizen advocacy groups who are opposing these measures. They hope to make you tired.
3 elections and possibly 3 defeats. I mean, they've already been defeated twice. But the point is that the registrars, the notice sent to the registrars was typically a 27-page notice that basically went over all the things that the registrars are not holding the sponsors of these bonds to account. And I'm just going to give you one example out of the many that we have, because it's a very easy example to understand. And this is for education bonds, whether it's for any school or college district, no matter if it's Prop 39 or not, they're required by law to state in the ballot statement. This is the statement that the voters see when they put their yes or no next to it, right? So it's the most important thing, because it's what the voters, just like the candidate names, it's where they choose their candidate or where they vote yes or no or whatever it is.
Sure.
So that statement is on the ballot, physically on the ballot that they vote. And here's what the law, I'm just going to quote the single piece of it. It says that statement must include the maximum rate of interest. In other words, the amount of bonds to be voted upon, the maximum rate of interest. Now, guess what? and I'm going to just pick Los Angeles County, Mount Sac, which has the largest bond in Los Angeles County this coming November. So the maximum rate of interest is 12%, by the way. That's what the state legislature has permitted for bonds.
Right.
So what Mount Sac does, and every other measure in the entire state for the past 16 years does, is they put a language like this. Measure, and I'm reading from the Mount Sac ballot statement, measure authorizing $750 million in bonds at legal rates.
Okay.
Now, at legal rates doesn't tell you what the maximum rate is. That's what the law says. And the registrars could easily see this but they let it go, and it's part of their state inaction to allow these bonds to pass. Because if somebody were to put in at no greater than 12%, somebody reading that might say, "Oh, wait a minute! I only paid 3% for my house. They're going to pay 12%." In other words, that is a very devastating piece of information.
Yes.
And I did research on it, and I know we're coming up toward the end of the segment, but I did research on this particular one, and that's why I wanted to raise it.
Yeah.
Because out of all the bonds that have been on the ballot since 2001 for school or college districts, 1,243 bonds, four stated the actual maximum rate of interest.
How did they do?
So,
did they pass?
No, they didn't pass. And they
There you go.
four
That's why the
were
others
from
didn't
one
have
county.
it. Yeah.
All four were from one county, Inyo County, which is Death Valley area.
Right. Okay, now, well, we've only got about a minute or a minute and a half left. I want to thank you again for all of your efforts, and will our listeners be able to go to bigbadbonds.com and see some of these comments and your research up there, Richard?
Yes, the public in general can see a lot of stuff, but the public part of the site is the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
The meaty stuff and the strategies and tactics are all for members only.
Gotcha.
So you actually have to sign up to see that stuff.
Sure.
But there's a tremendous amount of stuff that's available to the public as well. It's just not the meaty stuff.
This is a tremendously broad topic, which is very difficult to tackle even in a couple of hours, much less a couple of segments. But you and I are beginning our conversations. All of you listeners out there, conservatives, taxpayers, we are just beginning our dialogue on these important local issues. And Richard, I hope this won't be the last time we have you on. I look forward to having you on again between now and the election. I hope you will be available.
Okay, Mike.
All right. And once again, bigbadbonds.com, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, RadioFreeLosAngeles.net. Back with you after the top of the hour here. Okay, back with you here. Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson. Be sure to join us. Call in here at 866-870-5752, or if you like, 866-870-KRLA. And the website here is am870theanswer.com. Now, we're happy to have you back with us. That was an incredibly good segment. And, even those of us who are interested in all these issues and know that bonds are a place where the stealing is blind, these are complex financial instruments, the regulations surrounding their issuance, the compliance that's required is difficult to understand. Most of us have no familiarity with it, but we really need to work hard in doing that. Now, we got a few callers. Dave from Orange County, I'll get to you in a minute here. Thanks for calling in again. We want to give you a couple of updates before we do. Now, first of all, we have an update on Proposition 6, which is remember, it's yes on 6. Proposition 6 repeals the recent gas tax and registration tax or fees increase that jacked up the average family of four's bills by about $800. And when you consider that the price of fuel has been rising, the state of California has had a real windfall. Notice that the only people ever have windfalls are people in private industry, but the biggest windfall recipient of all is the state of California, with rising gas taxes and with rising inflation, which is increasing their revenues right along with the inflation. It's a terrible situation. You've got to vote. Now, Carl DeMaio, who has been with repealthegastax.org and Reform California, tell us what's happening next, Jonathan.
Yeah, next Sunday, September 9th, the Glendale Burbank Republican Assembly is hosting a Repeal the Gas Tax event at the Jeffers Estate. And that's is that in La Cañada?
Yeah, La Cañada, right on the border of La Cañada and La Crescenta.
Yeah.
It's right at the top of the two.
It's a down-home barbecue with the Sardo Brothers band. Sonny Sardo, I don't know if he's in the band.
Yeah, Sonny's is.
Oh,
yeah.
he is? He's in the band? Okay.
Oh, yeah, all those Italian Goombas are in that band.
Yeah.
These guys are kind of famous.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And you can RSVP on Eventbrite. They're selling tickets. So I think the tickets are around $25, but you can go on Eventbrite and find that. They got barbecue tri-tip lunch. It's going to be a good old time.
And the Jeffers Estate itself is a very beautiful place. It's a great venue. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. We've got at the end of the hour, we're going to have our always famous and eagerly anticipated Government Grifter of the Week award. We'll get to that. But before we do, we still have a couple of calls. We've got our friend Dave from Orange County. He's got something to say about the gas tax here. How you doing tonight, David?
Hi, Mike. God bless you. How's your week going? Pretty good?
Pretty good. It's Sunday night. We're here fighting. It's America.
Okay.
All right.
Well, may you enjoy your Labor Day Monday off if you have that off. And I've got something, a tool for everybody now. Okay, so you're talking about the bonds. I just want to throw in my comment about the bonds as well, okay, in addition to the gas tax tool that I have for everybody. That guest was talking about bonds, okay? And
yes.
It is important to know that that's where that crazy train, boondoggle, high-speed rail came from.
That's right.
And it was a deception, and now we've got to do everything we can to kick that in the can. And so here's the deal. Prop 6 is a deal. Prop 6 will repeal the gas tax. The gas tax was passed last April, and that gas tax, the previous gas tax and the current one that they did, well, they're just going to break the rules again, like they did with the other gas taxes, and break the Constitution of California twice and spend it on other things like bloated pension increases, bloated government salary, union employee increases and benefits.
Right.
And they're going to use it for the right thing. So here's what we do, Mike and everybody. This is an incredible tool that you can defeat all these issues on. And you have the voice, baby, and here it is. You get a hold of your candidate who's running for Republican Assembly, get on their volunteer calling plan. You call the voters. You're given a phone. You can use your cell phone. They'll give you, if they don't have an office where you're using their phones, you can use your cell phone, and they'll give you a list of voters in your district to call, and you could say anything the heck you want to say.
Right.
Okay, as well as their line. But here's what you say. The gas tax, talk about how it's a fraud they're going to use to spend other things on, and that it's causing a cost of increase on retail and at the gas pump. And then you tell them that your Democrat assemblyman is causing high crime increase by these crazy bills such as AB 931, AB 1810, AB 109, and Prop 47. And they all created these things, and it's causing a dramatic increase in crime in California, endangering every Californian's life, causing an epidemic of in-home break-ins, car thefts, and thefts, period. And so say those two things and say the line that your assemblyman gives you.
Well,
you got a baby called Democrats, Republicans. Don't be afraid to talk to Democrats. I'm having great results with Hispanics.
Well, yeah.
And on the phone.
Who knew? They have families like we do. I've often said, there was a part of Huntington Park that is actually Walnut Park that I grew up in, and I've often remarked that the people who are there now are basically the same people that were always there, except for their last names are Garcia and Rodriguez instead of Jones and Smith. But they work, they have families, they have expectations, they have futures, they have retirements they have to put aside for, and there's no inherent difference between them and us. Now, many of these folks do have a history of voting Democrat, but that's why we have to reach out to our fellow citizens on issues rather than on party. Party is no longer useful. We don't even want to try to agree or disagree on Trump or anything else. What we want to do is agree with them about the future of their children, agree with them about their need to keep more of their money so that they can put aside for their own future. As we get the progress that we need, we will create the condition to elect good representatives again, whether they be qualified Democrats or qualified Republicans. But clearly the party system is broken. But the institution that is most broken, David, and you've spoken to that issue tonight, the institution that is really broken in this country is the institution of citizenship. And that's where everything begins in our country. You have called on your fellow citizens and the listeners to this program to get state.
I spoke to a non-citizen also, and he listened to me. Okay, I spoke to a brother who wasn't home, and his brother was a Democrat. Hey, and I spoke. Now this was on the phone off the voter registration list, and I'm telling you, Mike and folks, look. Two things that really get people's attention is money and pain. Look, our safety is in great danger. And
my wife uses both of them when she talks to me.
Okay. Well, hey, Mike, thank you for the time. And, hey, folks, get on those voter calls, okay?
You got it. Hey, David, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Hey, you hear that music? That means we're coming up on a break. When we come back, we'll have Bill from South Bay to continue his story about Eric Garcetti, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, RadioFreeLosAngeles.net. All right, you heard that telephone number. Call in, join the program. I love talking with with everybody out there. I get to take a call from Bill of South Bay, and then we want to specially recognize the many people who've been contributing to the program. We're going to mention the city that they live in, where the contribution has come from, because I think that you'll be pleased and surprised, perhaps in some cases, at just how broad the signal is and just how much support we have here in this program. We now have Bill from South Bay who wants to regale us with an anecdote about Eric Garcetti. Glad to have you back, Bill.
I was thinking of that. You were playing that music from the movie Patton, right?
Yes.
I love George C. Scott. He was such a great actor, but I thought in that scene he says, America loves a winner, but it's funny, I thought, wouldn't that be terrible if people said America loves a loser and they support someone like a Garcetti who is a loser?
Oh, he is.
He is. The thing, this is a true story. 2 years ago.
This is to be carefully distinguished from your others, I take it.
No, but what I'm telling, this is different. When I was,
okay, this is a true one. Giving you a bad time, Bill. Go ahead.
Okay, no, I know. No, I was just being funny and just before, a little humor. Anyway, that was my Mort Saul, Will Rogers kind of humor,
Oh God, do we miss Mort Saul?
Well, he's still alive, he still performs.
You're kidding?
He still does perform. He still performs up in Mill Valley, California. That's where he lives.
You remember back in the day, we used to see Mort Saul, whom we always kind of perceived as a Jewish liberal, and he used to do these. He'd do a program a series with George Putnam, who, of course, was the very traditional American conservative Republican, and those guys were good together.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Mort Saul is an old school kind of a guy, and he does not like the filth and the profanity of the current generation, and he's an old school guy. If he was a liberal, he's like an old school. He's not like a new school. There's a difference between being a liberal and being a leftist, because Mort supports controlling the borders and all these other things. He is not in favor of. And George Putnam was a Democrat. I got to know him.
Yes.
George was a Democrat, but he was an FDR, and Adlai Stevenson. Stevenson was nothing like the current party at all. He had integrity.
No.
He had integrity, and he was nothing like, say, the Clintons and John and Robert Kennedy, who he knew, who were both against a welfare state. So Hubert Humphrey, Barbara Jordan, who stood, her position on immigration, Eugene McCarthy, who started the Federation for American Immigration Reform and was against these trade agreements. So you're talking about individuals of those that were different than the current party, and so Mort and George actually liked each other and were pals.
They
really liked each other.
They were great together.
Great friends.
Yeah.
And they agreed with each other in a lot of things. They just did that publicly to try to stir up a little, so there'd be a little bit of difference in interest, but they actually agreed. Now, let me get to Garcetti. I was watching this on the second Friday in March 2016 on the Channel 2 News. Pat Harvey, I have a lot of respect for her. She worked with Jerry Dunphy years ago, and she and Paul Majors, who had just retired, he talked about his battle with substance abuse, alcohol. But an example of two great journalists who don't give their opinions unless they just do the news straight. Okay, so like my buddy Maury Green used to do when he did the news with Jerry Dunphy, they were great. They were good. They were great. And so anyway. So Dave Bryan, who I think is a first-rate reporter, was covering an event where Garcetti was speaking publicly, okay? Then the question came up, Mayor Garcetti, it's been reported that money that is supposed to be used for fixing potholes and the sidewalks with the FICA trees and and all these for needs of repairs in the city, that you're actually using that money to put in your coffers for your re-election campaign.
Huh.
Garcetti was right on tape there. It was embarrassing. He ran out the back door. He was a coward. I said to the person I'm watching this, can you believe
he just left?
Guy is in office? Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't answer their question.
Wow.
And then on this station in the morning, The Answer, Brian Whitman is on there. And even though Brian's a liberal, he really sometimes he takes shots at Democrats. He really is really down on. He and Jennifer Horn were really laying it on thick on Garcetti, saying, Mayor Garcetti, so you want to run for office? And Brian says, you haven't done one thing on the homeless issue. He said, if you would do something and did something and you had substantial achievements, I could see, okay, I might, there'd be a reason to support you. But you're like so many people, you run for office and then you want to collect your pensions and your pay raises and your rich retirement benefits, but at the same time, you're not doing anything, but you just want to move to higher office. He goes,
that's right.
But and Brian Whitman, again, who calls himself the liberal, he has attacked, and you listen on the Answer in the morning, you'll hear him say that.
Yeah.
And so Garcetti, another thing Brian Whitman got him on is this is publicly, he was telling these reporters about his wonderful childhood. But then Brian Whitman said something that was so right on the mark. He goes, Mayor, why, if you had such a great childhood, then why, as a public official all these years later, why don't you try to leave something for the next generation so that they can have something positive to say about Los Angeles like you did when you were growing up, instead of helping to ruin it by doing nothing and making the problems worse?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and
well,
so
he's just a weasel in a suit, that's all. Yeah, that's amazing. Hey, Bill, I want to thank you for your call, but before I let you go, you seem to be a guy that consumes a lot of media with a long memory, and thank you for mentioning some of the names that I remember so fondly as well. Our program here is, as you know, has been emphasizing local and financial issues that really belong to the city of L.A., county, and state. Do you like our emphasis on this program? What's your take on it? I know you called in, so you had something to say.
I think you do a great job because your background is what you've worked in local county governments yourself, right?
No. I've always had honest employment.
No. That's funny. That's funny. No,
No.
but you know what? You know why it's important that you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
Because what you're showing is there's a direct correlation between the great California that we knew, and it's just pathetic the way it's gone down the toilet.
Yes.
Because of the mismanagement of these people. If they can't budget their money and they're going to misappropriate funds and they're going to vote for things that are questionable and then keep them going after they're failing, and they're not going to be really be true public servants, then there's a correlation between why we're in the mess we're in and their actions. I think you're right on the mark.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate the input on our program. Be sure to go to RadioFreeLosAngeles.net and join up there. We'd love to have you as a member. We've got 4 minutes to go. Jonathan, this is your time. We've got some wonderful people who have contributed.
Yeah, we are. The contributions are kind of rolling in. We still need to increase them, but I'd like to do a special thanks to Alan in Beverly Hills.
Yes.
Bill in Bel Air, George in L.A., who we talked to earlier, Rex in La Crescenta, Howard in San Clemente, and Bob in actually, I don't know where Bob is from, but thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
And Elaine in Santa Monica.
Wow. So that's all over the Bay Area, all the way down.
Yeah, the west side.
To Orange County.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank all of you. And there's many others, of course, whom we did not mention tonight. You know who they are. And many of you have been with us for years. We thank you very much. We're working together. And I think that this is starting to click because of you. And the reason why I ask these questions, I've had a lot of feedback, and people really do listen to it for the emphasis on local and the fiscal aspects of it, and how we integrate our understanding. And remember, local government spends as much as big government. Government, we always think of runaway government as being federal. Hell no, it isn't. You have these the cities and the counties and all the rest of these thieves are stealing from us with both hands as well. It's growing like Topsy there.
Bob in Burbank.
Yeah,
thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. All right.
And I tell you, it really encourages us when we get these contributions. So that means that you're listening and you appreciate what we're doing.
That's right. TaxpayerGazette.org.
TaxpayerGazette.org. Visit that.
Yeah.
But our main website is CaliforniaTaxpayersUnion.org. Go there tonight, click join, and sign up. We'd love to get an email notifying us of your membership.
All right. Now, all of you out there in Radio Land, I know what you've been waiting for. That special moment of the week where we really dig in.
And now, live from Glendale, California, it's this week's Government Grifter Awards.
All right. Who are the nominees?
The nominees this week come from Sunnyvale, California.
Oh, yeah.
The home of Apple, Google, and all the rest.
Uh-oh.
So I'm telling you, these are some well-paid public employees.
And they love government up there.
Yeah, they do. They love government. That's why I picked Sunnyvale this week.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start out with a couple, nominees. Our first nominee is the solid waste specialist.
Now, is that the mayor? Or the spokesman for the mayor.
That's right.
Solid waste specialist.
Well,
yeah.
And these are
That's the whole city council.
Yeah. These are 2017 total pay and benefits.
Yeah.
And we get these numbers from transparentcalifornia.com.
Yes.
The solid waste specialist in 2017 was pulling in $143,000 a year.
Uh-huh. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So
that's a lot.
Our next nominee is the Golf Operations Manager. 2017, the Golf Operations Manager was pulling in $192,000 a year.
Golf
Operations Manager.
You get that little white ball.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
All right.
Okay, and we have another nominee, the Manager of Job Seeker Services.
Yeah.
Total pay and benefits, $223,000 a year.
Jeez.
Yes. Now, these are my favorite. I have a lot of nominees.
Yeah.
But we've got 3 deputy chiefs of police in Sunnyvale.
Right.
The first of which is pulling in $375,000 a year.
Oh, man.
Second of which, $393,000 a year.
$393.
Third deputy chief of police, $429,000 a year.
All right. Hey, I got a lot of comments to make, but you got 30 seconds. Make it good.
Okay.
Drum roll, please.
Drum roll. And this week's Government Grifter Award goes to Manager of Job Seeker Services. Congratulations, Manager of Job Seeker Services. This is your first nomination and first Government Grifter Award.
And even though you're all the way up there in Sunnyvale, believe me, we want you to call us and tell us, what do you do for that kind of money? Hey, it's been another great show. We want to thank all of you for sticking with us here. And if you have nominees for Government Grifter of the Week, such as Solid Waste Manager or whoever your mayor is in your town, call us in. We'd love to hear from you. Go to radiofreelosangeles.net, all one word. Join us, become part of a really expanding program. And I want to thank, before I leave, Jeff, guy who runs our board. It's always great to have you, Jeff. Thank you. And the lovely Miss Brooke, who does a call screening. You should call our program just to talk with Brooke. She's that good. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.